Hi friends, it's an exciting day. First seed starting of the year. Now, listen, you're probably seeing people on social media starting all kinds of seeds. Remember, don't get anxious. Well, it's okay to be anxious, but don't get ahead of yourself here because people start seeds at different reasons for different times, including when they're last frost-free dated, but also because they might be growing them in a different way. A lot of flower farmers have hoop houses to be putting things into. So remember, you should always just count back from your last frost-free date and figure out when you should start seeds based on that. Today, we are starting, and I'm going to talk through the process of starting the wonderful one and only purple bell vine. But before we get to that, I have a little tip I want to share with you, and I am really excited about this, which tells you what kind of gardening geek I really am. So a couple of years ago, Laura from Garden Answer used a paper pot system that she picked up from Gardener Supply. And that was very interesting to me for a number of reasons, primarily in that it sort of seemed to work a lot like soil blocks in that it would air prune the roots at the bottom, but without having to do soil blocking. I still think the best plants I ever grew were when I was soil blocking. But one of the reasons I stopped is because when I was soil blocking, I was growing a lot fewer things from seed. And so it wasn't a big deal if it took me extra time to create soil blocks. And I was mixing my own soil for that. And I still have tried a few things that are supposed to be okay for soil blocking. It never worked. So for me, like it just got to the point where even though I was growing really good plants with soil blocks, I didn't really feel like putting the time into it. So that's where these paper pots came in. But there was one thing I didn't like about them. They are not made to fit into a regular 10 by 20 tray. So a year or maybe 2 years ago, I tracked down the company in China, I think it's China, that makes these. And I found it. I found all the stuff. And then I found out that you have to order these things in cases of, I think, 1,000 or 500. And none of it made economic sense, even if I had a really good idea. So fast forward to today, the folks over at the Garden Answer store have brought these into their store, which I am thrilled about. And I ordered some right away to try what I thought would work the whole time, and it does. So when you get these paper pots, they come like this, and then you've got a couple of spreader bars. So I went onto the Garden Answer site and bought a 10-pack of these and a set of spreader bars and none of the trays. And then what I did was I cut off, this is the long edge, I cut off one of the rows on that edge. And I don't think you have to be super careful with this. I clearly am not. Now I'm stretching this into a grid bottom, and then this will go into a solid tray for watering. Okay, so now you can see that instead of the 5, we have the 4 here. And I'm just going to stick that spreader bar in there, just as though the other one was there, but it's not. Then you stretch this out. Now it's going to be too long on this end as well. So what I do is I just don't stretch out that last row. You could take the time to cut that off, I'm sure. And maybe when it comes to taking these apart, that would be better. But I'm not going to do that because I will deal with that some other time. And then we just stretch it out like this. And that is how you fit these paper plates into a regular tray that you already have with a humidity dome that fits on top of it. Now, if I were using these now, I would fill these all with soil, kind of make sure they're compacted a little bit. Not compacted, but firm down. Take these spreader bars off, put this into a solid tray, plant my seeds in it, put my humidity dome on top, all good to go. So anyway, I just want to show you that little tip that you can use those paper pots that Garden Answer is now carrying, and maybe there's somewhere else you can buy them from, but I haven't found it. And you can use a regular tray with them. But that's not actually how I'm starting these seeds, so I'm going to set this aside and we're going to get on to the purple bell vine. So I got these purple bell vine seeds from Select Seeds. That's Rhodochiton, atrosanguineum. Other places probably have them, but I have found them at Select Seeds. There are not a lot of seeds in a pack, just so you know. this is how I like to start a ton of seeds. So that is just broadcast sowing them into a small tray. This little one is new. This is the mini seed tray. I got this at Greenhouse Megastore, and I bought a bunch of them because this is actually, I think, the perfect size for most people to be broadcast sowing seeds into. And this broadcast sowing method works for a lot of different types of seeds. It doesn't work good for seeds that dislike root disturbance because a big portion of making this work is disturbing the roots. So not good for those seeds that don't care to be transplanted in that way, but great for many other things, particularly great for something like this purple bell vine, which can take a very long time to germinate, like 30 days. I've even read up to 45 days. So you're going to have a seed tray sitting around for a long time, taking up room, not doing much else. And that's why I love these little guys, especially if I'm going to be starting a lot of things, which I'm not at this point because I have nothing else that needs to be started right this moment. Because you can put these all under one humidity dome and just pull them off as you need to. One of the things that I sort of have come to realize over the last few years is that almost every seed starting mix is improved by sifting it. So this is a set of plastic sieves. There was 3 in them that I got years ago, I think from Garden Tool Company. But you can use anything. You can go to Goodwill and get yourself like an old sieve there. It doesn't really matter. And what I like to do, now I'm making a big mess here, but so I sieve it into my soil tray then. And then, see, you can see that this mix, this is, what is this? This is Fox Farms Light Warrior. Honestly, I don't have a seed starting mix that I have tried that I absolutely love. But this one is pretty good. But you can see it has a lot of perlite in it. And I don't feel like that perlite is helping a lot. I think it creates kind of big chunks that can actually inhibit root growth in seedlings. So I've been doing this for a while, and I should be wearing a mask actually because it's quite dusty. I've been doing this for a while, and what's left when I'm done sifting, I actually put it all into a bag and save it, and then I add it into any sort of container mix that I feel needs more drainage, and it all gets used in the end. Okay, well, I'm going to call that good for what I need for this project. Okay, so then I'm going to add some water to my mix here. This is a very, you know, it's quite dry. In fact, it's a good thing I'm doing this because it's actually so dry that it's not soaking up water immediately. So it'd be really bad to put seeds in that. And just make sure I get myself as dirty as possible for this. All right. All right. Soil goes into the pot here. The pot. The tray. I've also used things like, you know, takeaway containers from grocery stores or restaurants. But those generally don't tend to be very deep, so I like the depth of this quite a lot. This is the first time I'm using this particular tray. So these are seeds that you want to just surface sow. They come in, you can always tell when they're little seeds when they come in their own mini envelope within the envelope. Even though I will say that I have spotty germination with this plant, at least in the past, I'm not going to sow this whole packet because just in case we have really spotty germination, I want some seeds in case I need to start over again. So I am just, now, if you wanted to, you could do the toothpick trick with these, but since I'm broadcast sowing, it doesn't matter too much where the seeds go. You just kind of want to offer them a little bit of space. So I might do like just a couple more on there. but I'm not overly concerned about where they end up on the top of this. I'm just trying to give them a little bit of space between them. Okay, so I have maybe half a packet left. Okay, now I'm going to do a little vermiculite. This happens to be a very fine vermiculite. I don't think it matters too much, but it's just a little layer of vermiculite to help with the moisture on the top there. I do vermiculite on top of every seed I sow. So regardless of whether it's a seed that's planted deep or a seed that's surface sowed, I still do vermiculite. Then the other thing I want to do after I get the vermiculite on there, important because I don't want to accidentally pick the seeds up with whatever I'm using for this, is I take a little, this is like a little tamper that actually came in some sort of kit I had. The bottom of a glass would work fine, by the way, or anything like that, a piece of wood. And then I just sort of lightly, very lightly firm this in. And all I'm trying to do there is just make sure that we've got good seed to soil contact, which is still important even if you are sowing on the surface. Okay, that's it. We are done. That's all there was to it. Do you see why I like this broadcast sowing method? It is so quick. I will put these into a 10 by 20 tray, only so that I can put a humidity dome over the top and it'll fit nicely, and stick this on a heat mat. And that, in my opinion, is the key to growing purple bellvine. Purple bellvine is native to Mexico. It wants heat. And if you've ever been lucky enough to grow it, and this is truly a wonderful vine to grow, you will know that it doesn't really do much until it gets hot. So that is absolutely a testament to a plant that is from Mexico. And I have had mixed success in the past with starting this plant from seed. I found it to be not the easiest thing. Last year, I had a great deal of success with it. And that was because I started it very early, first, second week of February. I put it on a heat mat. I used this method of broadcast sowing, and then I transplanted it from there. But I never took it off that heat mat. Because I grow in the basement, which is cooler, I would say, even though we've got heat on that side of the basement, I would say it's probably, 60 degrees. That's pretty cool ambient temperature for a lot of plants to grow on, and certainly for something from Mexico. So unlike other plants where usually after they germinate, you want to take them off of the heat mat so they tend to get really leggy if you leave them on a heat mat too much after they germinate. This plant I left on the whole time. Now, if I were starting seeds in a warmer ambient temperature, that probably wouldn't be necessary. But because I am starting in a cooler place, I feel like it needs that extra heat. And I think that was borne out by my success last year. All right, so here's where we go from here. This tray goes into its own 10 by 20 tray, just so I can stick a humidity dome on top of it and have a good seal. All of that goes on a heat mat underneath a light because it needs light to germinate. I will let those seedlings grow on for a little bit, certainly at least until they get one set of true leaves, perhaps beyond that. I'm just going to kind of keep an eye on where the roots are. If I start seeing roots pop through the holes on this thing, then it's definitely time to get them out of there. And I put them into individual cells. I won't worry too much about the diameter of those cells, but I will be looking for something fairly deep, like a 4-inch deep cell would actually be a really good size for this, I think. I will let them fill up those cells, and then I will transplant them onto bigger pots. The whole time growing them under lights and on the heat mat. Last year when I planted these out, I had them growing in gallon containers. And I will tell you that I ended up at the end of it with, I think, 5 or 6 plants. And I certainly started many more seeds than that, but 5 or 6 plants was what made it through the process. So I do sow extra of these and hope that it goes well. Then I plant these out when the soil is pretty warm. This is one of those things that I won't plant out until probably the first week of June, unless we have a very warm spring, because these cannot really tolerate, they just shut down. The second they get cold, they just stop doing their thing. And I'm going to have them growing, hopefully, pretty well inside. I want them to keep up with that growth. In terms of position for these actually do better with a bit of afternoon shade. Even in my climate, they do better in afternoon shade. I always plant these on the 2 pots that are on my deck. And the one that's a little bit to the south tends to get, as you might imagine, a little bit more sun for a little bit longer in the day. And I will tell you that the one that doesn't get any of that afternoon sun actually does better. I've not pushed it into any kind of what I would consider to be shade situation, but I will say that it does not want to bake in the hottest part of the day in the sun. The leaves look very much like morning glory leaves, and I've had people tell me that makes them very nervous because they've had a horror story with morning glories. Not related to morning glories, so you are safe to go about it. I've never had these. Well, I guess I've only grown them in pots, so I can't say that I've never had them reseed around for me. But these are actually tender perennials. So in Mexico, these will, I think, die back to the ground and come back. I don't really know. I don't live in Mexico, but I'm telling you, they're perennial there. I did try to pot one up and bring it inside for the winter ones, and it was an unmitigated disaster. It got a terrible infestation of all sorts of bugs before I could even blink. So I just threw it away, and I decided that the way for me with this plant is to start with new plants every year. The other thing to note about this vine is that you do have to give it something to twine up, and it needs to be something pretty narrow. I actually create a string trellis for mine. Certainly a chain link fence would work, something like that. I don't know that it would make it around a bamboo pole. I think that might be too big, but again, I've never tried that. It's an absolute legend on a string trellis, and it will, when it's really growing, it will put on 10 inches of growth, I swear, in a day. I think you could just sit there and watch it grow because goes up. And then if you don't give it anywhere else, once it starts going up, if you don't give it anywhere else to go, it's much like Thunbergia in that it will come back down again. So you can also make this a trailer, and you can make it one of those very cool trailers that goes up and then trails out from there. Or you can just keep leading it other places. One year I set up strings along the horizontal length of the pergola on the deck, and it just followed that string right across so that the entire pergola was covered in purple bellvine coming from two different sides, and it was pretty magnificent. So I am zone 5B6A. I work off a last frost date of about May 5th or so, and base when you should start these on that. I would say in most cases, it's probably, as long as you're okay with babying them through several pottings up and keeping an eye on them, I would say better to start sooner rather than later on these because you just don't know how long they're going to take to germinate. First seeds of the year are planted. That alone is exciting, but it's even more exciting that it is probably my favorite annual, for me, vine that I grow. So definitely worth a try. Give yourself some patience with this, both in waiting for it to germinate and a little bit of patience if it doesn't go well for you, because I have had great years with these and I've had terrible years with these. Don't blame yourself if it doesn't go well. Give it a shot anyway. All right, have a great day in your garden. I will see you soon. Bye-bye.